I never thought I would see the day when my parents stood in front of me, their voices shaking, their pride gone, asking me for financial help. Their savings, everything they had flaunted for years, were wiped out. Suddenly, the child they had once dismissed, ignored, and labeled self sufficient had become their only hope. My father cleared his throat as if preparing himself. He said softly, "We're going through a tough time." My mother nodded beside him, her eyes red as she added, "Families should support each other. We need you to help us get back on our feet." I listened quietly, not out of shock, but because the moment was so ironic that it almost made me laugh. Just 2 months ago, they told me, "We don't waste money on you," when I asked for $30,000 to finish my degree. 2 days later, they proudly handed my cousin $200,000, yes, $200,000 to pursue his influencer journey. The same cousin who quit after just a month because content creation was too stressful. Now, with their savings gone, their golden child hiding in shame, and the reality of their choices hitting hard, they had nowhere left to turn but to me. I finally looked them in the eyes, really seeing their desperation for the first time, and I said the sentence I had waited my whole life to say: "Help the one you trusted more." What followed, the arguments, the truths, the fallout, they never saw any of it coming. My name is Maya. I'm 23 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been fighting for a life my parents never believed I deserved. I wasn't the rebellious or dramatic child. I was simply invisible. While other kids complained about strict parents, I silently wished mine cared enough to check where I was going. I worked part-time jobs from the age of 16, not because I wanted extra money, but because I learned early that if I didn't support myself, no one else would. Getting accepted into a competitive university program in data analytics, a field I loved, felt like my first real chance to break the cycle my family had been stuck in for generations. I dreamed of building a stable career, moving out, and creating a life where emotional neglect wasn't the norm. But while I worked double shifts, pulled all-nighters, and lived on instant noodles, my parents spent their time and money maintaining relationships with relatives who barely remembered my name. They praised my cousin for every little achievement, boasting about him as if he were a prodigy, while they dismissed my academic successes expected. Anytime I needed something, a book, a bus pass, help with tuition, the answer was always the same: "You're smart, you'll manage." Yet anytime a cousin needed a new phone, tuition, wedding expenses, a loan, or even bail money, my parents were the first to jump in, acting like heroes. I wasn't jealous. I was worn out. Education became my only escape plan, my one chance to build a life where love didn't come with conditions. Tell me, have your parents ever invested more in someone else while ignoring your needs? Growing up, I quickly learned that in my family, love wasn't something you received. It was something you competed for. No matter how hard I tried, I always came in last. My parents weren't abusive in the usual way. They fed me, clothed me, and sent me to school. But their neglect was quiet and subtle. It slowly chipped away at my sense of worth. Whenever relatives visited, my parents turned into the most generous people. They bought gifts, paid bills, covered school fees, and even sponsored vacations. But when it came to me, everything was too expensive, unnecessary, or my favorite: "You're independent. You can handle it." They used the word independent as a compliment, but I saw the truth. Independence was just an excuse not to invest in me. If my shoes were worn out, they told me to save my lunch money. If I needed materials for a school project, I was told to be creative and figure something out. Meanwhile, my cousin Liam was treated like royalty. He was the golden child of the entire extended family, the boy who could do no wrong. He was lazy, spoiled, allergic to hard work, and obsessed with validation. At every family gathering, he talked about the latest trends, influencers he admired, or how he was destined to become famous. Instead of rolling their eyes, my parents nodded along, completely enchanted. I once asked my mom why Liam got everything he asked for while I had to justify every small need. Her answer still stings. Because he needs help, you don't. That was when I realized they saw me not as a child to love, but as an adult who owed them resilience. The favoritism only worsened as we got older. When Liam failed his classes, my parents paid for private tutors. When he wanted a new phone, they bought him the latest model. When he decided to be a singer one month, they paid for vocal lessons. When that failed, they bought him a guitar. When that also failed, they bought him editing software for his filmmaking dreams. Every failure was met with, "It's okay, sweetheart, you'll find your path." Meanwhile, when I excelled in school, received awards, or won competitions, the reaction was always the same: a nod, a tight smile, and a quick topic change. Their priorities were clear. I watched as they poured their money and affection into everyone except their own daughter. What I didn't realize was that this habit, this need to impress others, this obsession with appearing generous, would one day cost them everything. I had no idea that the boy they protected so fiercely, who they treated like a rising star, would be the reason their world collapsed. The moment I finally gathered enough courage to ask my parents for help is a memory I wish I could erase, but it remains in my mind with painful clarity. It was a quiet Sunday evening when I naively thought they might finally see me. I had just received an email from my university. Without the remaining $30,000 in tuition and lab fees, I wouldn't be able to register for my final year. My heart raced as I walked into the living room where my parents sat watching TV, laughing at something a relative had posted on Facebook. I stood there for a moment, reminding myself that I wasn't asking for luxury, I was asking for my future. When I explained the situation, my dad muted the TV, looked at me blankly, and asked, 30,000? Why do you always need so much? My mom didn't even look up from her phone. You're smart. Can't you find a scholarship or something? She asked, almost irritated by my presence. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained that I had already applied for scholarships, loans, and grants. I had explored everything, but the timing was tight, and this was my last chance to finish. That's when my father sighed, leaned back, and said the words that sliced right through me. We don't waste money on you. Waste money on me. I stood there frozen, feeling the weight of every year of neglect pressing down on me. They didn't say it with anger or cruelty. They said it with indifference, and somehow that was worse. They turned the TV back on as if the conversation was over, as if my future meant nothing. I walked back to my room numb, unaware that just 48 hours later, I would discover something that would shatter whatever faith I had left in them and expose the depth of their hypocrisy in a way I never saw coming. 2 days after my parents dismissed my future like it was a nuisance, I discovered just how little I meant to them and how far they would go for someone else. It was a Tuesday morning when I woke up to my mother laughing loudly in the kitchen, a rare sound unless relatives were around. Curiosity drew me to the doorway where I heard Liam's voice, excited and loud, filled with the kind of confidence only someone who has never faced consequences can have. Auntie, this is perfect. With $200,000, I can launch my influencer career properly. You guys have no idea how much this means to me. I froze. At first, I thought I misheard. 200,000. My parents didn't hesitate to call my dreams a waste, yet now they were funding Liam's fantasy with enough money to cover my entire degree twice. I quietly stepped into the hallway and saw my parents beaming at him as if he were the second coming of Christ. My dad patted Liam on the back proudly. We believe in you, son. This is an investment in the family's future. You'll make us all proud. My mother added, her voice filled with affection I had never heard directed at me. And don't worry about the money. We know success takes capital. Just follow your passion. The words hurt more than any insult. They had called my education, a real career, a waste, but apparently Liam's influencer dream was a worthy cause that justified draining their savings. Later that day, as I walked past their room, I saw their banking app open on my dad's phone, the transfer confirmation glaring on the screen. $200,000 sent. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or laugh at the absurdity of it all. Meanwhile, Liam spent the next week boasting to everyone in the family about his big break and professional setup. He flaunted brand new camera gear, top of the line DSLR, drone, ring lights, stabilizers, all bought with my parents' money. He rented luxury Airbnbs to create the right aesthetic, hired a photographer for branding shoots, and bought stacks of designer clothes for engagement. He even paid for fake followers and likes because organic growth is too slow. Every day, packages arrived at our house filled with new gadgets, props, lighting kits, microphones, and editing tablets. My parents watched proudly as if you were building the next billion-dollar empire. They called relatives to brag about how they were supporting young talent and investing in the future of digital media. Not once did they mention me. Not once did they ask how my classes were going. Not once did they acknowledge the humiliation they put me through. That week, Liam filmed dramatic slow-motion walking videos, unboxing clips, fake travel vlogs, and cringe day-in-the-life montages. He spent money as if it grew in their garden, buying $700 sneakers for content, ordering catered meals for the aesthetic, and hiring editors who quit after 2 days because he refused to revise his poor scripts. He posted everything with captions like, "Chasing my dreams thanks to my amazing family," while I sat in my room figuring out how many extra shifts I needed just to cover my next semester's textbooks. The contrast between my struggle and his carelessness hit me like a slap. I felt repeatedly. Every click of his camera, every bragging phone call, every "Auntie, you're the best," served as a reminder that I had never been worth what he wasted in a single day. What my parents didn't realize was that the very dream they funded so blindly, the one they thought would elevate the family name, was about to collapse. And when it did, the real downfall wouldn't be Liam's, it would be theirs. The weeks that followed felt like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Liam spent money faster than a gambler on a losing streak, and he didn't even try to hide it. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of new deliveries. Another expensive camera lens, another designer outfit, another gadget he didn't even know how to use. He hired 3 freelance editors because he loudly proclaimed that real influencers don't edit their own stuff. He fired all 3 within days because they didn't understand his vision. He spent thousands on ads to promote his posts, only to complain that the algorithm hated him. He bought followers almost every night, staring proudly at his inflated numbers while ignoring that his engagement was almost zero. He traveled to different cities for content, wasting thousands on flights, rentals, and Airbnbs, only to come back with shaky footage and poorly acted skits nobody asked for. Meanwhile, I struggled to balance my part-time job, classes, and constant exhaustion. I tried to study between shifts, scribbling notes during lunch breaks, forcing myself to stay awake long enough to finish assignments. My classmates talked about internships and career plans, while I silently calculated whether I could afford groceries and textbooks in the same week. At home, the emotional contrast was suffocating. My parents praised Liam every single day as if he were a rising star. "He's dedicated," my mom would say proudly. "He's ambitious," my dad would agree. "See, that's what passion looks like." Then they'd glance at me and their tone would shift to disappointment. "You worry too much. You're too serious. Maybe if you tried something creative like him, you wouldn't be so stressed." It was like living with 2 completely different families, one that worshiped Liam's failures as potential and another that treated my hard work as an inconvenience. Dinner became silent torture. Liam talked nonstop about his content strategy, how he was going to reach 1 million followers by the end of the year, and about brand deals he was manifesting. My parents nodded eagerly at every word, hanging on to his delusions like they were gospel. I sat there in silence, chewing tasteless food, my resentment boiling under the surface. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted and starving. I found Liam showing my parents a slideshow of his future content plans. My dad looked at me and said, "Look at him. That's a real effort. That's someone who's doing something meaningful." Something inside me cracked. "Meaningful?" I repeated quietly. "He's spending your money like water. He's not even creating real content." My mother's face hardened instantly. "Don't be jealous," she snapped. Jealous? I laughed bitterly. I'm working 3 jobs just to stay in school. I asked for help and you called it a waste. But this circus is meaningful? The room went silent, but my parents didn't waver. My mother crossed her arms. Liam believes in his dreams. That's more than we can say for you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But all I did was walk to my room and quietly close the door, knowing that yelling wouldn't change their minds. In their eyes, Liam could do no wrong, and no matter what I achieved, I was still the child expected to survive on scraps. Nights became the hardest. Lying awake, listening to Liam film obnoxious skits in the living room, I felt a bitterness I couldn't control. I wondered if something was wrong with me, if I wasn't lovable enough, impressive enough, or simply not worth the investment. But deep down, a different voice whispered, they see what they want to see. They choose who they want to choose. And none of it had anything to do with my worth. Still, the resentment grew until it felt alive, weighing heavily on my chest. Every time Liam posted another cringe video, every time my parents bragged about his potential, and every time I dragged myself out of bed for another shift, the anger sharpened. So tell me, what would you do if your parents funded someone else's dream while crushing yours? It didn't take long for Liam's influencer dream to fall apart. After just a month, his engagement numbers barely changed, despite all the money my parents had spent on him. Hate comments flooded his post, with trolls calling him lazy, fake, and unoriginal. The few early supporters quickly lost interest. One evening, I overheard him yelling at the camera while trying to record a new video. The algorithm is broken. It's rigged against me. Everyone is sabotaging me. Later, he blamed his expensive equipment. The camera makes me look stiff. Then he claimed the editors were incompetent. When that didn't work, he even whispered to his followers during a live stream that I was sabotaging him, saying, Maya doesn't understand real talent. Meanwhile, my parents watched, initially proud, but slowly horrified as the reality sank in. All the money, every cent they had saved for the future, was gone. Their golden child had failed. With that failure came panic, shame, and a sense of desperation they had never shown toward me. My dad muttered, "We didn't think it would happen this fast." My mother hid her face, clutching her hands, trying not to cry in front of the neighbors who would come by to ask about Liam's big break. In the midst of chaos, they realized they only had one option left: turn to the very child they had ignored and dismissed. That's when they approached me, not with pride, not with love, but with pleading eyes, desperate words, and false humility. Maya, they said, we need you to help us now. For years, they had chosen everyone over me. Now, stripped of their illusions, they had nowhere else to go. Looking at them, I understood something powerful. The family that had abandoned me for Liam's empty promises was now completely at my mercy. What I said next would change everything, and they had no idea it was coming. The moment that approached me felt almost cinematic in its audacity. My parents entered the living room, their faces softened into expressions of concern. Their eyes glistened slightly, making their concern seem sincere, while their voices trembled as if the weight of their financial disaster was somehow my responsibility to fix. Maya, my mother began, reaching out to touch my arm. We are family. You should help us during this difficult time. Her words felt sweet, but the bitterness beneath them was clear. My father nodded vigorously, using guilt to sway me. We've always believed in you, Maya. You're our only hope now. You can save us. They didn't just play on my emotions. They twisted our entire history together to prove that I owed them. We never ignored you, my mother added, her voice shaking just enough to seem genuine. You've always been independent. You chose to manage on your own, and that's admirable. But now you can help us, right? For the family? I stayed silent. I didn't flinch or respond. The silence stretched, adding tension to the room until I could feel it pressing against my chest. They tried again, desperate this time. My father shifted uncomfortably, lowering his voice. Liam's failure isn't entirely his fault. He tried hard, but the world is unfair. You understand, don't you? My mother chimed in with false encouragement. You've always been responsible. Surely you can guide us through this, help us rebuild what we lost? I kept my gaze fixed on them, calm and controlled. I let them dig deeper into their own guilt and shame. Every line they uttered, every tear they pretended to shed, only strengthened my eventual answer. Then, in a quiet voice that cut through their theatrics, I said the sentence that would change everything. Help the one you trusted more. The words landed like a hammer. My mother's hand froze midair. My father's mouth opened and closed, searching for an argument that didn't exist. Silence fell. The weight of every lie, every act of favoritism, and every bit of neglect they had shown me returned to them all at once, made clearer by my refusal. That single sentence was not just a reply, it was the truth, the judgment, and the reckoning. I wasn't pleading, negotiating, or begging. I was stating a fact they could no longer deny. In that moment, everything they had built, the illusion of control, their carefully curated family image, the narrative of favoritism, shattered. They painfully realized that the child they had ignored was now completely at my mercy. The impact of my words hit the house like a storm. My parents stood frozen as their carefully maintained composure fell apart. Anger, shame, and disbelief crossed their faces. My mother's shoulders shook with silent sobs, while my father muttered accusations not at me, but at each other. "You shouldn't have given him that money," he said. "No, you encouraged him." Their voices rose, overlapping as they blamed each other for Liam's failure and the financial mess they had created. Meanwhile, Liam disappeared into his room. He avoided everyone, his pride wounded and ego bruised. He refused to even acknowledge that he had wasted everything. Outside our home, extended family members began calling. Some expressed concern, while others offered advice, all wrapped in a familiar admonition. "Maya, you need to respect your elders. Don't be so harsh." I could hear them on the phone, suggesting compromises and pleading for me to be understanding, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Yet for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't think I had overreacted or been unfair. I simply watched the chaos I had anticipated for years, the natural fallout of favoritism, neglect, and blind indulgence. I observed my parents struggling with the real consequences of their choices. I saw clearly the walls they had built around their judgment crumble. In that clarity, I found a strange peace. I wasn't celebrating their pain, but I felt free from the burden of carrying their mistakes silently. I was free from the weight of constantly trying to earn recognition I would never receive. I realized something important in that moment. Standing up for myself was not a betrayal. It was a matter of survival. I had finally drawn the line, and while it was painful for them, it was necessary for me. So, I ask you, watching this now, was I wrong for holding my ground? Or was I finally standing up for myself in a family that had spent years ignoring my worth? After the chaos settled, I turned my focus inward. I was determined to reclaim the life I had almost lost. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I reached out to mentors who believed in me and carefully planned how to stretch every dollar I earned from part-time jobs. I learned to work smarter, prioritizing high-impact tasks and taking on opportunities that mattered. I stopped wasting energy on empty approval. Slowly and carefully, I rebuilt the path toward my degree, one semester at a time. I faced challenges that would have seemed impossible without resilience and focus. By the time I graduated, I had not only completed my program, but also gained real-world experience, internships, and a sense of confidence I had never felt when my parents decided whose dreams deserved their money. Meanwhile, Liam's career stayed in limbo. He drifted from one low-paying job to another, never finding stability or direction. He always relied on charm and short bursts of enthusiasm. The money from my parents was gone, and the lessons were never learned. My parents, once so sure of their judgment, now faced a bitter reality. Relatives who once sought their approval quietly distanced themselves, tired of financial mismanagement and repeated favoritism. Socially and financially, they struggled and had to confront the consequences of their repeated choices. As I watched from a distance, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow, not just for myself, but for the family that failed to see my worth until it was too late. Yet, there was also a lesson I carried forward. Loyalty and love are not obligations. Supporting those who respect and value you is far more important than pleasing those who ignore your potential. The emotional weight I had carried for years began to lift, replaced by quiet confidence and clarity. But even as I moved forward, one lingering thought remained, a final revelation about the family I was born into that would forever shape how I define trust, value, and the people I allowed into my life. Looking back, I've realized something that took years and many moments of heartbreak to understand. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Just because someone shares your last name or childhood memories doesn't mean they will support, value, or protect you. My parents loved their version of family. This version included cousins, appearances, and an illusion of success. However, they often overlooked me, the one who truly needed their support. At first, recognizing this truth was painful. It felt like admitting that those I had always relied on would never be dependable. But with that pain came freedom. I learned that my worth was not tied to their recognition or approval. Their choices were not my responsibility. Leaving behind the toxic patterns they created was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. I spent years trying to fit into the mold they set for me. I aimed to earn their validation, but I failed every time because their priorities never matched my needs. Once I stopped seeking their approval, I found freedom, clarity, and confidence I had never known before. I completed my degree, built my career, and surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I truly am, not who I was expected to be in someone else's eyes. While my parents and Liam continue to struggle with their choices, I have learned a lesson that no amount of favoritism or betrayal can erase. You can step away from people who repeatedly choose others over you, even if they are family. It's not selfish, it's necessary. I hope that by sharing my story, others who have been overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed by their loved ones can find the courage to stand up, set boundaries, and prioritize themselves. Have you ever felt ignored or overlooked by those who were supposed to care the most? If so, I want to hear your story because speaking out is the first step toward reclaiming your worth. Thank you for watching and listening to my story. I know many of you have faced similar pain being overlooked, dismissed, or hurt by those who were meant to love you unconditionally. You are not alone, and your feelings are valid. If you want more real-life stories about betrayal, family drama, revenge, and emotional healing, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, stay tuned because next time I'll share the shocking story of how my aunt tried to steal my inheritance until I exposed her at a wedding.